for the Suffolk Strangler, the serial killer who devastated 5 families.
I wish we still had the death penalty, as this is what he truly deserves.
And tore his own family apart.
The thing is, the whole thing can never be put right.
October 2006, and on a few isolated back streets in Ipswich, up to 30 young women ply their trade to curb crawlers. One of these was 19-year-old Tanya Nicol. She had been working the streets for more than a year, and on the night of October the 30th, she left home around 11 to begin touting for business. But on this night, Tanya failed to return home. 24 hours later, her mother, unaware of her daughter's prostitution, reported her missing.
This is 19-year-old Tanya Nicol. She's been missing for over a week. Police are extremely concerned for her welfare because of her lifestyle.
It's not uncommon for people to go missing. More than 200,000 cases are reported every year. But in this instance, alarm bells began ringing almost immediately.
We knew Tanya was a prostitute. We knew she was a working girl. So she's already sort of regarded as high risk. She's working in a high risk industry. She's vulnerable.
On her regular schedule, we would know that she was around. She would contact somebody. When she didn't, we knew that actually we were dealing with quite a serious case.
Because of these fears, the police decided to make a public appeal in the hope that someone somewhere knew where Tanya was.
Unfortunately, the investigation so far, we haven't managed to locate her on any of the buses she may have caught into town, and we haven't located her on any available CCTV to date.
A worried mother waits for news of her daughter. Anyone who can help should call Suffolk Police or Crime Stoppers.
Tanya Nicol's disappearance may have made news in Ipswich, but the story barely registered on the radar of any newspaper or TV station outside of Suffolk. But that would soon change, because just a fortnight later, another woman would go missing in exactly the same circumstances. Gemma Adams was just 25 years old. She had been working the streets for 2 years, but after going out on the night of November the 14th, she hadn't been seen again.
Well, I started to get worried because she wasn't replying to my text messages. And Gemma always replies to me, and she didn't.
Like Tanya Nicol, Gemma always kept in regular phone contact with friends to tell them about her whereabouts. But now those calls had stopped. For the Suffolk police, this was an ominous sign. Soon they were stepping up their efforts to find both women.
We distributed some 20,000 leaflets around the area. We set up road checks at periodic times after the disappearances, and we interviewed some 400 people in respect of Tanya's disappearance and some 300 in respect of Gemma's disappearance.
But the leafleting campaign produced no leads, and police became increasingly pessimistic about finding either of the women alive. Along with their appeals for sightings, they began looking for bodies. 2 weeks later, they found one. By the side of a dark and isolated brook, a passerby came across the remains of Gemma Adams.
The body was found in the water just a few hundred metres down this path. Police have now sectioned off a wide area and are investigating the scene.
When Gemma was found, I think we went into shock. We all thought that, OK, we had 2 women that were missing, but we were confident that we were going to find them. And that's when it sort of started to hit home that we were dealing with a murder case then.
With one prostitute dead and another missing, local reporters descended on the red light district. There they found girls who were frightened to work, but still unwilling to give up.
Going out there, like thinking, oh, it's not my turn tonight, am I not going to come home tonight, do you know what I mean? But what choice have I got but to go out there, like, so, like, you're in a dilemma, like, if you don't go out there, you're going to be ill. If you do go out there, then you're going to be terrified.
All the women had a Class A drugs habit, so the reason they were going out was to feed that habit. They weren't going out for fun, you know, or because they thought, oh, well, you know, I'll pop out and do a bit of work and then I'll come back again. Actually, they needed that. They were being drawn by that addiction.
Cars would go by and you'd be praying that they would pick you up to get money, but you'd be praying that they wouldn't, because you don't want them to do what they're going to do.
After finding the first body, the police extended their search for Tanya. And 6 days later, they found her. Like Gemma, she was discovered in Belstead Brook. And like Gemma, she'd been murdered.
Discreetly shielded by a line of police officers in their vehicles, the body of a young woman is recovered from a brook in the countryside just outside Ipswich. For the second time in less than a week, the grim sight of an ambulance taking away a dead girl whose naked body had somehow ended up in a stream.
This probably wasn't the deposition site. It wasn't where she'd entered the water. There had been significant flooding during October and November of 2006, and she'd probably been carried in the flow of the water to Copdock, and she'd got caught up in some shrubbery.
Suffolk Constabulary, which dealt with an average of 6 murders in an entire year, now had 2 in the space of 6 days. Whoever was responsible seemed to be picking out girls at random from Ipswich's red light district.
Why have you decided to come out tonight?
Because I need the money. I need the money, you know.
Despite the dangers?
Well, that has made me a bit wary about getting into cars, you know.
But presumably you will do that tonight?
Well, probably.
This was 24-year-old Paula Clennell. She would not live to see Christmas. In December 2006, the sleepy county of Suffolk had become the scene of one of Britain's biggest investigations. 2 women had been found dead after going missing on the streets of Ipswich. And although their bodies were both discovered in the same river, detectives were unable to establish a definite link.
The bodies of Tanya Nicholl and Gemma Adams were found in fast-flowing, very cold water. And the problem that presented from our perspective was because of the immersion in water, any trace evidence that was present was likely to have been destroyed or washed away.
But if there was any doubt that the deaths were linked, it was soon to be removed. Despite a high police presence on the streets, Suffolk Constabulary were getting more reports of women disappearing. And just days after the second body was found, a third was also discovered. This time, the victim was 24-year-old Annalie Alderton. And like the others, she'd been working as a prostitute.
Once Annalie Alderton's body had been found, then clearly we were into a different realm. And it looked at that stage very much that we'd got a serial killer on our hands. We'd clearly got very obviously linked murder investigations in a very close area around Ipswich, and all the indications at that stage was it was the work of one man or men working together in sort of a spree of killing.
Because Annalie's body was found on dry land, the police felt they had a better chance of finding useful evidence. Head of crime scenes David Stagg was given overall responsibility for recovering it.
As you can see, the site where the body was deposited is literally 15, 20 yards away from the road, in a little bit of a clearing. This is pretty much as it was at the time with the foliage. The body itself was actually laid out in a cruciform position, which was quite disturbing for the people who actually found the body. But of course the weather at the time was absolutely appalling, and that presented a big problem for the scenes of crime officers who came here, because priority number 1 was all about scene preservation. The opportunities for DNA evidence and fibre evidence would be washed away unless we got the tent over the body as soon as possible.
As the forensic officers got to work, the investigation team came to terms with the new enormity of the case. A small force like Suffolk was ill-equipped to deal with a serial killer.
There probably wasn't an hour went past where I wasn't thinking, how many more, what else are we going to find, because it was just escalating at such a rate. What we lacked with the staff, the numbers of police officers and police staff to actually assist us to put in place all of the different things we needed to do.
Of the 43 police forces in England and Wales, 40 sent help. More than 100 members of the Forensic Science Service were also drafted in. David Stagg and his team were under pressure to find clues pointing to Annalie's killer, but it was proving difficult.
As you can see by the undergrowth that's here, it can be difficult to establish who has been where within the scene. Footprints aren't left very readily on this type of ground, apart from some of the foliage being trampled down. It is quite difficult to determine, if a body's been lying here for sort of 5 days, exactly where the point of access was, and we did have difficulties with that with this particular scene.
Meanwhile, detectives began piecing together Annalie's last known movements. They discovered that she had travelled by train from Harwich to work in Ipswich's red light district on the night she disappeared.
We got some CCTV footage of her travelling on the train and on the platform at Manningtree before actually travelling on to Ipswich. We established that she'd visited her mother before leaving Essex. She was actually looking to raise money in order to buy Christmas presents.
But there was something more significant about these CCTV images. The date on the film showed they were captured on December the 3rd, the day after the first body, that of Gemma Adams, was found. That meant the killer was not only on the loose, he was also operating right under the noses of the police.
That he continued to prey on these women was incredibly audacious, but very risky as well. The police very quickly, as you'd expect, targeted the red light district. They had a very visible presence there. One slip up, one foul move, and he would have been caught red-handed. And there were people who were saying, well, how can this possibly happen? You know, we've got the CCTV cameras, there's plenty of officers around the streets.
It wasn't just the public who were asking those questions, the media were too. They were descending on Suffolk in force, and as the number of victims grew, so did the amount of cameras.
We confirmed the recovery of a third body with the media on that Sunday evening, so we knew what to expect the following day. It was pretty overwhelming, and it continued to build throughout the course of that week.
The interest in the story suddenly mushroomed, really. It became enormous overnight.
Can I clarify, 98 of 12, thank you. Yeah.
One of the smallest forces in the country is now dealing with an unprecedented killing spree.
You can imagine my reaction and that of the force. You know, good grief, what's going on here? What's happening? This just doesn't happen in Suffolk. On average, we get about 6 or 7 murders a year here in Suffolk. Well, we now had 3 during, you know, a relatively short period of time. Little did I know, of course, what was to come.
What did come, and very quickly, was news of yet more prostitutes disappearing. Annette Nichols was one of 2 women to go missing during the following days. The other was Paula Clennell, who had given a TV interview on the streets of Ipswich less than a week before.
I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that she is with friends or something, you know, if she's done something wrong. I don't know. You know, all she has to do really is just contact her mother or the confidential police line, and she'll get all the help she wants.
I saw Paula like a couple of hours before she went out that night, and I'm like, well, make sure you look after yourself with all these people. And she's like, don't worry, I'll just stay like near on these streets so I'll be safe, like I'll be seen and that. But then she didn't come back the next day.
That next day, December the 12th, police were examining the wooded area where the 3rd victim, Annalie Alderton, had been found. It was while searching for fresh clues that they stumbled across a 4th body.
And obviously we had a lot of media interest down at this scene, so of course when the news was released that another body had been found, the press were actually on the scene right away, and they were actually filming as the cordons were being put up. It was literally just a few hundred yards away as the crow flies.
The 4th victim was identified as Paula Clennell.
I will need you at some point to go, all right?
No problem at all.
When Paula's body was discovered, we deployed the force helicopter to overfly the area and photographically capture the scenes.
And you can see the live images, and we can see the first body, what transpired to be Paula. And it appears that Paula had just been dumped. She'd just been dumped probably about 8 or 10 metres in from the road into fairly deep undergrowth. And we looked away, I think, to speak to the inspector.
Turned back and saw a body on the screen, which actually was laying in a different position. Didn't think too much of it at that time. It really sort of just was carrying on organising things.
And of course, reality then kicks in, and we realised that actually the air support unit have found a 2nd body
and it was